a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
Is the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning. It's 9:30. What day is it? It's Monday. It's 22nd of May. This is To The Point on GB News.
With Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner. They might remember who else. Suella Braverman, the Home Secretary, she's in big trouble, or is she? Over asking her officials, could they possibly see if she could do her speed awareness course in private?
I think that's absolutely fine, don't you? Keir Starmer. Well, when he's not talking about Suella Braverman today, he wants to ban junk food ads during the day as part of his NHS strategy, and also a sugar tax.
During a cost of living crisis, are you sure, Mr. Sir Keir? And the latest on some other morning TV show, is this the end for Philip Schofield? Who? Who's he? All that to come on To The Point.
It's a good start, isn't it? It's a good start. I think we're over here now. All of that still to come this morning. I don't know where we are. That's pretty much... might set the tone for the day. Right, we are going to have, first of all, your news with Tamsin Roberts.
Bev, thanks very much and good morning from the GB newsroom at 9:31. The Home Secretary's conduct over her speeding fine will be addressed by the Prime Minister when he speaks to his ethics advisor. Suella Braverman has been accused of breaching the ministerial code following claims she asked for help in arranging a private speed awareness course. It's alleged she also tried to avoid getting points on her driving licence. Rishi Sunak, who was asked about her handling of the matter while in Japan for the G7 summit, will seek advice on whether there should be an inquiry. Shadow Public Health Minister Andrew Gwynne says she needs to go.
Look, I've got real frustration here about this because at a time of a cost of living crisis that people want real answers to, at the time that our NHS is on its knees and needs fixing, we're here yet again talking about another Tory minister who has sought to bend the rules, play the system for their own advantage. Of course, she needs to face an ethics advisor. I would go further. I think Rishi Sunak needs to show some leadership and show her the door.
Russia's Wagner group of mercenaries has announced plans to leave Ukraine's eastern city of Bakhmut. The group's founder says forces will retreat from the 25th of May until the 1st of June. It's after Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky dismissed claims by the paramilitary organisation that it has successfully taken the city. Labour will pledge to cut suicide rates in a speech later today. Describing it as the biggest killer of young lives, Sir Keir Starmer will promise measures to reverse the rising number of deaths within 5 years. He'll also outline plans to modernise the NHS and announce targets for waiting times under a Labour government. A warning is being issued over a number of new sophisticated scams. Consumer group Which says at least 4 are doing the rounds. They include fake PayPal and missing person appeals, fraudulent app alerts and pig butchering, which is given its name because fraudsters fatten up the victim by forming a romantic connection before executing the financial part of the scam. Ryanair has recorded an annual profit of £1.24 billion, reflecting the return in demand for travel. That's equivalent to almost £40 per second. Europe's biggest budget airline revealed the profits last year are due to fares rising 50% more than the year before. The airline said rising fuel bills also helped turn around a loss of £309 million from the previous year. TV, online, DAB+, radio and on TuneIn. This is GB News. Now it's back to Andrew and Bev.
Good morning.
Morning. Suella Braverman, she's going to be big in the news this week. She's going to be she's facing Home Office questions in the House of Commons this morning. At the same time, the Prime Minister, we understand, is to talk to the Ministerial Ethics Advisor as to whether she breached the ministerial code by asking her civil servants, could they help her have a private speeding awareness course? They said they couldn't. So she took the fine and took the points.
Yeah, so Rishi Sunak has refused to publicly back her when he was questioned at the G7 yesterday. He's under pressure from the opposition parties to basically launch an investigation into this nonsense.
Yeah. Olivia Utley is our political reporter who is in Westminster. Olivia, I've covered so many ministerial will they, won't they resign, will they be fired. This, on the scale of alleged wrongdoing, seems pretty minor.
Yes, I mean, some people argue that this is just a sort of start of the silly season story, and Suella Braverman has certainly come out fighting. She argues that she didn't actually ask civil servants to arrange a one-to-one private course, speed awareness course for her. She simply asked if they were able to. They said no on Cabinet Office advice, and lo and behold, she took the points on her licence instead of choosing to do the course. So she's got a pretty strong argument, and it sounds as though Rishi Sunak will probably back her up. As was mentioned there in your opening remarks, Rishi Sunak refused to support her yesterday, but then 10 Downing Street later said that he had full confidence in her. Meanwhile, Suella Braverman's allies are pretty angry about this because they think that it's all a smear campaign from civil servants to try and distract from Suella Braverman's plan to bring net migration down. We're expecting to see the net migration figures over the next couple of weeks, and this week in fact, and we're expecting to see them swell to between 700,000 and 1 million, up from a record of 500,000 last year. Suella Braverman is arguing that measures need to be put in place quickly to get those numbers down, including putting curbs on the number of students who can come here along with their dependents. And there's rumours in Whitehall that she is prepared to resign if those numbers don't go down. But obviously, if her ethical conduct is under investigation, that resignation would have less impact. So there is a theory that, and it's splashed on the front of the Telegraph and the Mail, that this is simply a smear campaign against the Home Secretary by those who don't like her plans for immigration.
We know, Olivia, how this story made it into the press in the first place, that she had apparently requested to do her speed awareness course on a one-on-one with an instructor. Because I just think it's really clear that we point this out. This isn't about the fact that she got the speeding ticket. You might say, well, maybe that would be worth, if she lost a licence, that might be an issue. But it's not that. It's not the fact she got a speeding ticket. It's the fact that she said, can I have this speed awareness course, do it on a one-on-one? She's probably the PA, and they've said, no, we can't do it. Do we know how this has got out into the press?
Yes, exactly. So what she has been accused of is asking civil servants to break the civil service code. Civil servants are required by their code not to treat ministers in a way that's be considered sort of special treatment, and apparently by asking them this she might have broken the ministerial code. How it got into the press, it's not completely clear. It was a Sunday Times story. Of course, that the sort of supposition is in Whitehall that it was civil servants who leaked the story, but there is no evidence for that yet. Suella Braverman's chief aide is in a bit of trouble, Jake Ryan, her special advisor, because according to the Mirror, he brushed them off. He said that there was no speed awareness course story when he was asked about it a couple of months ago. So it'll be interesting to see whether anything comes of that. But for now, we've just got to wait until the Home Office questions early this afternoon, and then the Prime Minister's questions straight after that. So it'll be quite an awkward little encounter that the Home Secretary and the Prime Minister have in the House of Commons.
Olivia, thanks for joining us. That's Olivia Utley. Delighted to say in the studio with us, as ever, on our Monday morning, is our favourite political strategist, commentator, Piers Pottinger. Piers, you and I, over the 30 years we've known each other, have counted them in and we've counted them out, cabinet ministers, forced out, resigned. On a scale of 1 to 10, this does seem to me to be pretty low down there.
Absolutely. I mean, what is quite clear is that this story, first of all, the incident, if it happened as it's been described, and there's a big question about that, but it happened in September last year. Someone has been waiting for the best possible opportunity and timing to leak this story, while the Prime Minister's on the other side of the country, while most of the political journalists are there. And so they give it to the Sunday Times. Now, it's going to have maximum impact in a week when on Thursday the new immigration figures are coming out. And if they're as bad as everyone says, it's obviously going to heap a lot of pressure on Suella Braverman. But again, it looks to me like a small cabal of socialist civil servants have decided to try and dispense with another minister. Now, this has got to stop. And I also think that Rishi Sunak now has to show leadership. I think we don't need another inquiry into something like this. We don't need an investigation costing millions for the taxpayer. Ridiculous. He should he should talk to her clearly, because he hasn't had a proper opportunity when he's coming back from Japan. He should talk to her, sort it out, and either back her or sack her. And quite frankly, the way I've read it, it could be I think it's quite difficult to interpret she broke the ministerial code. Because if she simply said to some of her advisors sitting around a table, do you think I could do a speed awareness course privately? And if they said, no, we can't help you on that.
Or they say, we could find out.
That's hardly breaking the code, is it?
They may have said, well, we'll try and find out for you, Home Secretary. Actually, we can't find out for you, Home Secretary, because we're not allowed to.
Exactly.
So she then said, OK, I'm paying the fine.
Yeah.
And I'm taking the points.
So there we are.
Tried to get out of any of that.
Personally, if I was advising her, I would have said, take the speed awareness course, because it shows a Home Secretary taking a hands-on experience. And I think she could have scored some other kind of points for that.
Very good.
What of her performance today in the Commons? She will be up facing routine questions from MPs from all sides of the Commons. She's going to be asked about it. She has an opportunity here to say, this is what I did. In hindsight, perhaps it doesn't look great. Sorry about that. But I don't think I've broken any rules.
Well, I would hope that before she appears in the House to answer those questions, the Prime Minister has resolved this matter once and for all. I mean, we should not be spending hours and hours. It's fine for the Labour Party to talk about, it's cost of living we should be focusing on. I agree. So should they. So should everyone else. Instead of talking about this tiny possible breach of the ministerial code, and if it is a breach, which again I'm not sure necessarily it was.
She's got enemies on her own side, of course.
Absolutely, and
because of her performance in the National Conservative Conference last week, it was a thinly disguised, to use that awful cliche, Piers, thinly disguised, look at me, case
Yes.
there's a leadership contest after the election if we lose.
Absolutely, there's no question it was a leadership kind of speech. But she's facing a real problem with immigration, and it may well be she decides to resign because she can't get through her legislation. Don't forget, in the Lords this week, my favourite man and yours, the Archbishop of Canterbury, is planning to introduce amendments, which is almost unprecedented for an archbishop to do this, and holding it up, deliberately delaying any kind of legislation. And the big plank one of the biggest planks of Rishi's promises is to stop or control immigration, both legal and illegal. And if he can't do that, it's a big disadvantage, because it's, other than the cost of living, the #1 issue on the doorstep.
The other big issue, of course, NHS in this country. And Keir Starmer's going to talk today. He's going to be giving a speech later on today to set out his vision for the NHS. He's going to say, apparently, that it is not sustainable unless there are health reforms that fix the fundamentals. And he also, interestingly, wants to reverse the rising number of deaths from suicide. These are actual points that we can kind of sort of hang your hat on, in a way, from Keir Starmer at the moment. That's quite a brave target to set.
Yeah, I mean, I think, quite frankly, from what I've read of what he's said or is going to say today, he's just tinkering at the edges.
Yeah, in a way.
I mean, I think, as so many people have said already, we need a royal commission on the NHS. It needs fundamental restructuring. And it's all very well saying we're going to prevent diseases, but actually, it's curing the patients is what we need to see happening, and in a much more efficient way. I mean, it's one of the biggest employers in the world, with over 1.4 million people.
Biggest in Europe.
And it's absolutely extraordinary that people are still trying to tinker at the edges. It's because politicians of all parties are scared of actually facing up to reality and actually grabbing this issue properly and having a royal commission, looking into it and totally remodelling the NHS, which is what is needed.
I wonder what working-class Labour voters will think behind the Red Wall, for instance, that one of the proposals they're floating this week is another sugar tax.
Yes.
So that's going to put up the cost of food during a cost of living crisis. It will raise inflation too. Hardly the time to do that.
But he's also been talking about banning fast foods during the daytime. I mean, I'm sorry, once you get a government trying to dictate what you can eat when, this is a sort of dictatorship. This is communism.
And this is advertising, which was your original industry, of course, Piers, with Bale Pottinger. So the idea that he could stop these ads in the daytime, I think, is kind of odd, because children are who he doesn't want to watch these ads. Well, children don't tend to watch that much telly in the daytime. They're at school.
They're at school.
Yes. I mean, again, I think it's very poorly thought through, this, if indeed it is thought through. And also, I don't think the traditional Labour voter is going to be very happy about being told when or where they can eat a sausage roll.
What of the idea, Wes Streeting, who's the Shadow Health Secretary, rising star of the Labour benches, talked at the weekend again about privatisation, more privatisation in the NHS. Well, that's music to my ears, because what we're doing at the moment doesn't work. But that could be a big problem for Labour.
Yes.
Right up to an election. What, Labour's going to privatise parts of the NHS?
Yes, I mean, that goes against everything they constantly have been saying. And if they start doing it, it shows, yet again, they're trying to patch up something that needs complete rethinking. And most people in this country know that. And the politicians know it. It's just they're not facing up to it because it's too big a task. And as we have seen over the last few years, it's pretty hard for the government to do anything, achieve anything. And it's about time people actually said, come on, the British taxpayer, most of our taxes goes already to the NHS. This is something that should be grasped and sorted out.
We've got this controversial strikes bill also going through the final stages today. What is this going to mean, Piers, for people who want to still continue to strike?
Well, I don't think it's going to have an enormous effect, but I think what they're trying to do is to stop people in emergency services or very important services striking at a time when it can cause so much damage and indeed some cases death. And I mean, again, with the NHS proposals of Labour, what is Keir Starmer going to give junior doctors, a 35% pay rise? Is he going to give the nurses a 10% pay rise? How on earth can he afford that? And I mean, the trade unions who pay the Labour Party are always keen to cause havoc to support the Labour Party. And I think most people are fed up with the strikes and would like to see some action taken.
And this minimum service bill that they're trying to get through will effectively do just say that. They've got to provide a certain amount of cover. That's what they do in France. It's what they do in Germany. It's what they do in most countries. It's beggars belief that it's taken this long for a Conservative government that's been in power since 2010 to get this on virtually through the stat. And it's been watered down, of course, in the Lords.
I mean, again, it's the Conservative Party showing its insecurity. I mean, it's scared of its own beliefs. And I think, again, this is a big problem for the Conservative Party. So much wokery is around, so much socialism is around, and yet we've had a Conservative government for 13 years. And I think it's about time the tide turned. And I'd like to see, as I say, a good example would be Sunak today standing up, backing his Home Secretary and saying, I'm not having any of this nonsense and I'm not letting a group of left-wing civil servants kick out a minister on a whim.
He should have been he must have been prepared for that question in Japan yesterday at the press conference, G7. It was the BBC political editor, Chris Mason, asked the question about the Home Secretary. He was very tetchy, and he shouldn't be tetchy. He should have batted that one away very easily.
Absolutely. It was... It showed him looking weak, and then he you could see him read a couple of lines about what he was told to say, because he must have known it was coming. It was obviously going to happen. But, you know, much though I admire Rishi in many ways, showing strong leadership has been sadly lacking. And I think, I mean, you know, the Labour Party are pouncing because they, you know, the best time to kick someone is when they're down. Of course they do. And that's what they're doing.
And I think he threw Dominic Raab, the Justice Secretary, under a bus over the bullying allegations. Everybody I've talked to says he was a tough boss to work for. I've worked for a few of those.
But we've had Dominic Raab, we've had Zahawi, we've had Gavin Williamson. Three of them have all gone for really... bullying or being tough or difficult bosses is hardly a reason for getting rid of a minister. And in this case, if she simply said, I wonder if I could do something around this, she didn't push it. She didn't say, you've got to do this. The story in the Sunday Times says the civil servants refused to help. Well, that can be interpreted in a number of ways. And if she simply asked a question, do you think it's possible I can do this? I don't see that's a reason to be sacked.
Because her people are making it quite clear. She didn't say, I want you to do this. She said, can you help?
Yes.
There's a big difference.
Of course there is. And if she simply asked them that question and they said, no, we can't help, that is not in any way a reason for sacking a minister.
If she apologised in the Commons, says, OK, if I did screw it up... Is she in the clear?
Well, I would... It depends, again, how it comes across and how it comes out. But it much more depends now on what Rishi action or inaction follows. And he's going to talk to Sir Laurie Magnus.
Yeah, he is.
And that's fine. That's why he's there as an ethics czar. But you don't need to have an inquiry.
The thing is, as well, that I just find this so shocking. She's a busy woman. And when you do speed awareness courses, I've done a couple. I really quite enjoyed them, actually. I did one in person way before lockdowns. And then after lockdowns, they went online. So I had to do one on... And it's you know, it's the Zoom call of shame. And there's maybe 6 of you in it and the teacher. And actually, you have no flexibility. They will give you the times of those courses and you have to do it. Now, if she went to her aide and said, can you see if we can do one-on-one and I can fit it around my busy schedule, If she did that, then just come out and tell us she did that.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, at her schedule, she can't necessarily move around very important meetings to fit in with something that she admits she had to do.
Yeah.
I totally agree, and I hope it'll be as simple as that.
I hope so.
But also, I think for someone to wait nearly 9 months before landing this blow with the press, and it may well be they tried it with the Daily Mirror first, and it didn't work because her sidekick actually said there's nothing in this story.
Well, we've got Kevin Maguire coming in a little later. We can ask him.
Yes, and I mean, it wouldn't surprise me but this was an orchestrated attempt to get rid of a Secretary of State.
Yeah.
And actually, that's quite a serious thing for a civil servant to be doing. And years ago, it wouldn't have ever been contemplated by any civil servant.
Interesting, Piers, we've got Nick Freeman coming in. He's the lawyer known as Mr. Loophole.
Absolutely,
and apparently he has got people speed awareness courses in private.
Yeah. Well, there we are.
So
she should have gone to him.
Yes. And of course, then there'd have been client confidentiality.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which is the other thing of the lawyer. So it'd be interesting to get his take on that.
It will be.
Thank you, Piers. Thank you so much.
Do you think when we speak to you next Monday, she'll still be Home Secretary?
I would say, I hope so, strangely enough. I hope so.
I hope so.
Yeah.
You know what? She's too good a politician. She's worked too hard. She's trying to do so much in that department. This would feel very wrong if she was to lose her job over
in the most poisonous department in Whitehall.
But bear in mind, we may not yet know the full story.
No, exactly.
Well, unless she was doing 100 miles an hour the wrong way up the A4 on a Monday morning.
I don't think she was.
She wasn't.
Because it would have been more than 3 penalty points.
Absolutely. Now, Trish has said Suella did nothing anyone would ask if it meant they could avoid points. Lots of citizens are given that choice. Dave says Suella's done nothing wrong. We all have the choice to do the course or take the points. More worrying is the civil service is trying to bring down or influence the government alongside the unions. Very clever, our viewers, aren't they?
They agree with you, Piers.
Yep.
Right, still to come more on that Suella Braverman story. As Andrew said, we've got a top lawyer to give us his take on it. Plus, apparently, Philip Schofield's normally on this telly at the time of the day on a show no one's ever heard of. Not there today. Stay here. This is The Point on GB News.
Watch us instead.
Hello there, welcome to your GB News weather forecast from the Met Office. I'm Craig Snell. Well, looking ahead to this week, most of us it's going to be mainly fine and dry. A little bit of rain from time to time across the far north, but for most it's going to be a fairly warm and sunny week. So the reason for the settled weather is this area of high pressure really going to dominate the UK as we go through this week. Weather fronts will always try to come in across the very far north, and it's here where we will see the risk of some rain. And in fact, we've still got a weather front just clearing away across eastern Scotland as we go through this morning. So some cloud and some outbreaks of rain here first thing. Also some low cloud across eastern England too. So a bit of a grey start here, but further west, plenty of sunshine around. And that continues as we go into the afternoon. A very pleasant afternoon for a lot of the UK. And in the sunshine, temperatures reaching 23, possibly even 24 across the southwestern half of the UK. Please note high levels of UV if you are out and about. Into the evening, we could just see a few showers affecting the Pennines for a time, but they will quickly clear away. And then really the early hours of Tuesday morning, plenty of dry weather around. The odd mist and fog patch too, but under the clear skies, turning a little bit chilly in the countryside. Most towns and cities, however, probably staying up around 8 to 9 degrees. So Tuesday morning, a lot of us starting off with plenty of sunshine once any early mist and fog burns away, except from the very far north of Scotland here, some thicker cloud and some outbreaks of rain moving in as the day goes on. But elsewhere in the sunshine, feeling warm once again, highs potentially peaking again around 22, 23 degrees towards the southwest. But just like today, levels of UV will be high, so do take some precautions. A quick look at Wednesday and Thursday, very similar. Lots of dry and settled weather around. Sunniest of the skies will always be towards the south of the UK, and here by Thursday we could see temperatures reaching the mid-20s.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything, I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it. Like like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Oh, it's 10 o'clock on Monday, the 22nd of May. This is To The Point with Bev and Andrew on GB News.
Well, speeding Suella, she's under pressure. That's the Home Secretary. We think an ethics inquiry is underway over whether, when she asked the Home Office, could they possibly see if she could have a private one-to-one speed awareness course, and they said no. Was that a breach of the ministerial code? What do you think?
Also, Keir Starmer wants to ban junk food adverts during the day as part of his NHS strategy. We'll have a look at the logic behind that.
And the latest on some other morning TV show. Not sure if you've heard of it. Is this the end for Philip Schofield? Who? Pardon the pun. All of that to come on To The Point.
Let us know your thoughts on all of our talking points this morning. gbviews@gbnews.uk is the email address. But first of all, here is Tamsin Roberts.
Bev, thanks very much. Good morning from the GB Newsroom. It's 1 minute past 10. The Home Secretary's conduct over her speeding fine will be addressed by the Prime Minister when he speaks to his ethics advisor. Suella Braverman has been accused of breaching the ministerial code following claims she asked for help in arranging a private speed awareness course. It's alleged she also tried to avoid getting points on her driving licence. Rishi Sunak, who was asked about her handling of the matter while in Japan for the G7 summit, will seek advice on whether there should be an inquiry. Shadow Public Health Minister Andrew Gwynne says she needs to go.
I've got real frustration here about this because at a time of a cost of living crisis that people want real answers to, at the time that our NHS is on its knees and needs fixing, we're here yet again talking about another Tory minister who has sought to bend the rules, play the system for their own advantage. Of course she needs to face an ethics advisor. I would go further. I think Rishi Sunak needs to show some leadership and show her the door.
Labour will pledge to getting the NHS off its knees by tackling waiting lists and deaths from heart disease and stroke. During a speech later today, the Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer will set out his plans for the health service. He'll outline ways to modernise the NHS and announce specific targets for wait times. Sir Keir will also use his speech to say all NHS cancer targets will be reached so patients are diagnosed and treated earlier. Calls are being made for every work-related suicide to be investigated by the Health and Safety Executive. It follows the death of head teacher Ruth Perry, who took her own life in January. Her family believes she was stressed because of an Ofsted inspection. Writing in the British Medical Journal, 2 academics say the profession has a duty to demand action to tackle the burden of mental ill health. Russia's Wagner group of mercenaries has announced plans to leave Ukraine's eastern city of Bakhmut. The group's founder says forces will retreat from the 25th of May until the 1st of June. It's after Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky dismissed claims by the paramilitary organisation that it had successfully taken the city. Nearly a third of young survivors of the Manchester Arena bombing received no professional support, with a report finding their experiences weren't validated by adults in positions of care. 22 people were killed when a suicide bomber detonated his device at the Ariana Grande concert 6 years ago. The Difference report showed 3/4 of children at the event were mentally affected by the attack, but professional support wasn't offered to 4 in 10 of them. The son of murdered soldier Lee Rigby has raised £40,000 to honour his father. Lee Rigby was 25 when he was attacked by extremists in Woolwich in south-east London in 2013. 12-year-old Jack is raising money on behalf of charity Scotty's Little Soldiers, which helps support bereaved children. A warning is being issued over a number of new sophisticated scams. Consumer group Which says at least 4 are doing the rounds. They include fake PayPal and missing person appeals, fraudulent app alerts and pig butchering, which was given its name because fraudsters fatten up the victim by forming a romantic connection before executing the financial part of the scam. The government plans to work with Ofcom to use new technology to clamp down on the spoofing of legitimate phone numbers. The government has sold its £1.26 billion stake of taxpayers' money in NatWest back to the bank. It's the latest in a series of stake sales by the government as it tries to whittle down its shareholding in the bank. It follows a near £46 billion bailout during the 2008 financial crisis. The government's minority stake is now down to 38.69% from around 41%. Ryanair has recorded an annual profit of £1.24 billion, reflecting the return in demand for travel. That's equivalent to almost £40 per second. Europe's biggest budget airline revealed the profits last year are due to fares rising 50% more than the year before. The airline said rising fuel bills also helped turn around a loss of £309 million from the previous year. The average house price has reached a record high this month after jumping by just over £6,500. Property website Rightmove says the average asking price for a home in Britain is around £373,000. The 1.8% month-on-month rise is the biggest of the year so far. Rightmove says the hyper-local market is still price-sensitive and buyer affordability remains stretched, but that there is now increasing confidence from sellers. This is GB News. More from me shortly. Now, though, it's back to Andrew and Bev.
morning. Thank you for joining us on To The Point on GB News. Now, Suella Braverman is to face questions from the Prime Minister over allegations that she asked civil servants to help her avoid getting speeding points on her licence.
And now the Home Secretary, who Rishi Sunak would not back when questioned about this at the G7 summit at a press conference yesterday, is under pressure from MPs to face an investigation by the Prime Minister's ethics investigation, Solori Myers.
Let's cross to our political reporter, Olivia Otley, who is in Westminster for us. Good morning, Olivia. This story's been kind of evolving. The way our take on it this morning, it's sort of changing slightly as more details emerge. But if people are just tuning in now at 10 o'clock on a Monday morning, what is she accused of?
Suella Braverman is accused of asking civil servants to act in a way which would be incompatible with the civil service code. So what she's been accused of is saying to civil servants, presumably in her private office, that when she was offered the choice between either taking a speed awareness course or taking 3 points on her licence and a fine, she said that she would take the speed awareness course, but then asked her civil servants if they could organise a one-on-one speed awareness course for her so she wouldn't have to do it with the public. They asked the Cabinet Office and the Cabinet Office said no. So in the end, she chose to accept the 3 points on her licence and the fine. But in simply asking them if they could help her, it's being alleged that she broke the ministerial code, which says that ministers can't ask civil servants to behave in a way which is incompatible with the civil service code. Lots of codes involved. But yeah, what she's being accused of is breaking the ministerial code. And Rishi Sunak is now being asked to defend her. He refused to all-out defend her when asked about it yesterday, but then 10 Downing Street issued a comment saying that he did have full confidence in her. He's now asked his ethics advisor to look into it, and it sounds as though by the end of the day we'll be a little bit clearer on where Suella Braverman stands.
Is the key part of the code, Olivia, where it says ministers must not misuse their position to further their private interests?
Yes, so that, and there's another bit where they're expected not to ask civil servants to act in a way that furthers their own ministerial private interests. So yes, this was apparently a private matter, nothing to do with her work as Home Secretary. Therefore, it's alleged she shouldn't have asked civil servants to intervene on her behalf to set up this one-to-one private course. She argues that she didn't actually ask them to set up the course. She didn't ask them to call the course and arrange a private one-to-one session. She simply asked if they could help her. And when they said no, she accepted no for an answer. So that's her defence, although the journalist for the Sunday Times who published the story in the first place, Harry York, says that this defence is new and that the Home Office had countless opportunities to tell him that defence previously and never did. So there's a little bit of a cloud over whether that defence is going to stand.
What's the view of Tory MPs, Olivia, coming back to Parliament from their constituencies? Are they largely supportive of her?
Well, yes. Suella Braverman has plenty of allies in the Conservative Party, and a couple of them have been very, very vocal in newspapers this morning. Miriam Cates and Craig McKinley among them, who are both sort of rising stars in the Conservative Party. Both have quite big followings in the 2019 intake. Both of them have suggested that this is simply a smear on Suella Braverman and that civil servants don't like her plans for migration. She is said to be thought to be bringing forward plans in the coming days to bring that net migration figure down. On Thursday, we're expecting to see it go up to between 700,000 and 1 million. That's up from 500,000 last year. And Braverman has been the face of policy measures to try and get those numbers down. It's thought that it's being rumoured in Whitehall anyway that she would be prepared to resign if the Prime Minister, the Chancellor and the Education Secretary keep on putting up opposition to her ideas on how to get migration down. But of course, her resignation would be less powerful, less effective if her ethics conduct was already under investigation. So the theory among some Conservative MPs is that this is simply a way for the civil service to distract from what Suella Braverman wants to be doing with migration.
Interesting. Thank you, Olivia Otley there. But it's a risky strategy, isn't it? Because, in a way, if I've understood this correctly, so if Labour and the Lib Dems and the civil servants are saying, right, let's stick Suella Braverman on the front page of the paper on Monday morning so that she's at the top of the news agenda, and then when these figures break on Thursday, which might be too high in the minds of the public, then the focus will be on her and everyone will know that they are failing on immigration. But the chances are we'll be talking about Suella Braverman's speeding points rather than the immigration figures.
In which they failed.
Exactly. So
yeah,
it's a sort of strangely thought-out policy.
I think that they can also, though, get it done today.
Strategy.
Because all the Prime Minister needs to do is have a conversation with Sir Laurie Magnus, I got his name wrong, Sir Laurie Magnus, the ethics advisor, and say, is it a breach of the code or isn't it? You don't need a big inquiry. He's got a view if he hasn't, and then it's done.
Yeah, well, let's see what political commentator Peter Spencer makes of it as well. Good morning, Peter.
Good morning to you both.
Good morning. What do you make of this situation? Is it a lot of fuss about nothing?
Well, I mean, there is a whiff of Watergate about this in that it wasn't the original break-in, it was the attempt at a cover-up which did for the president in question. Now, when it comes to Rishi Sunak's perspective on his Home Secretary, it is noted how grumpy he was when asked about when he was abroad doing his world statesman thing, and you can see why he wanted to generate headlines about himself, and then suddenly the whole thing skewed elsewhere. I mean, in my own judgment, I think he would like to see Suella Braverman gone. And the reason I say that is that she is, and has been for a long time, the darling of the right of the party. He brought her in, it is widely thought, into the cabinet, back into the cabinet, on the grounds of the Lyndon Johnson principle, which it is better to have dangerous elements inside the tent, as it were, answering the call of nature, out than the other way round. Now, scroll back to the early last week when Suella Braverman made a speech to an alternative Tory conference at which she flatly contradicted government policy on legal migration. Later on, of course, Sunak said, look, you know, actually, she might say that we should train our own fruit pickers, but what she said was, what he said was, look, we welcome them. And then when it comes to slashing legal migration, well, the Chancellor said, well, actually, look, we've got to be pragmatic and sensible. In other words, if we need to fill gaps in the labour market, we bring in migrants. And then to top it all came the Education Secretary, who said, look, you know, we will welcome more overseas students because they bring in the money and they raise our prestige. And so, to my mind, politically, Suella Braverman has absolutely blotted her political copybook. And for Sunak to find some excuse to be rid of her, he will be roaring from the rooftops in joy.
But, Peter, if he did get rid of her, she would be a dangerous enemy on the backbenches because she's got a lot of support on the backbenches. A lot of backbenchers think she's been unable to do her job on migration because the lever she tries to pull, the Prime Minister keeps ripping out of her hands, as does the Chancellor of the Exchequer.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's my point about the Lyndon Johnson thing is, of course, she would be dangerous on the outside. But I do come back to the speech that she made last week, which is widely seen as her pitch for Sunak's job. And it's OK to have a conversation like that, maybe if the Tories lose the next election, you then work out what is the direction of the Conservative Party, where is its soul. But to have it when poor Rishi Sunak's barely got his feet under the table at number 10 is struck a great many Tory MPs, I have to say, as more than a bit rich.
But what would it tell us about him as a leader if he gets rid of her for this? Because a lot of the things that she is saying around immigration are extremely popular with the voting public.
Yeah, I mean, what would it say? Well, I come back to it. I mean, what she is a visible personification of the monumental chasm within the Conservative Party. I mean, most certainly, you look at those 45 constituencies, the so-called Red Wall, who very clearly are deeply opposed to more migration in any shape or form. But then you've also got to look at what is now being characterised as the Blue Wall, which is more liberal-minded Conservative voters from the home counties who find that a lot of, for example, Suella Braverman's language, calling the boat people variously criminals and a swarm and an invasion and all the rest of it, that sticks in their craw. And when the next election comes, what Sunak does not wish to see is a whole load of them, perhaps millions of them, peeling off and either backing the Liberal Democrats or voting tactically to ensure that the Tories don't get back in.
All right, that's Peter Spencer, the political commentator.
Fascinating.
And interestingly, in the paper today, the former Home Secretary, the one before Suella Braverman, Priti Patel, has said she gave a speech, or she's written an article saying that Rishi Sunak as Chancellor blocked her getting the processing of asylum applications digitalised, which would have made a dramatic way, it would have dramatically speeded up the processing, and we all know what's the problem with a lot of the asylum seekers. It's taking sometimes 18 months to process these applications. Yeah. So the Chancellor cutting spending, not knowing then, of course, he might be Prime Minister, with immigration figures about to reach a record high. So Treasury, Number 10 have denied it, but why would she say it if it's not true?
Yeah. Honestly, they're an absolute shower of shame, all of them, aren't they? But I would genuinely want to defend her and to not lose her job over this. It does seem ridiculous. You see, John has said if she gets the immigration problem under control, the Conservatives have a very good chance of being re-elected. Labour will do everything in their power to get rid of her for this reason, and maybe also Rishi Sunak.
And we also know, Keir Starmer said last week, that immigration will rise, even from the current high levels, if Labour win the next election. Fascinating. Now, Sinn Féin's Vice President says the DUP, that's the Unionist Party, must return to power-sharing government following wins for the Sinn Féin in the local elections in Northern Ireland last week.
That's right. So Sinn Féin is now the largest party in local government and Stormont, and Michelle O'Neill claims the result shows that voters want Northern Ireland's governing executive back.
But will the DUP return to power sharing? We're going to get the thoughts of Sammy Wilson, who's the Chief Whip of the DUP. Good morning to you, Sammy.
Good morning.
Was this a wake-up call to your lot? They gained a lot of seats. I know you were on exactly the same number, Sammy, but is this a sign now that people want you to go back into Stormont and share power, albeit we'd have a Sinn Féin First Minister for the first time?
Well, I mean, first of all, we want to get back into Stormont as well, and we want to participate in government in Northern Ireland, but not on the terms which the government has now set for us, namely that if we go back into Stormont, then as Unionists, we would be required to implement the Windsor Framework, the Northern Ireland Protocol, European law, diverge from the rest of the United Kingdom, damage our own economy and break up the Union. And we're not prepared to do that. And if we were in Stormont legally, we would be required to do that. And I think that our electorate endorsed our stance, because don't forget, we have had for the last year a tsunami of opposition from the other parties, the media, church leaders, business leaders, the Secretary of State, who seems to have turned turtle. He campaigned for UK sovereignty and getting out of the EU, and now he's telling us that we must accept EU law, EU court rulings, and EU border controls in Northern Ireland. So we had all of that over the last year, and despite that, the Unionist electorate still endorsed the stance which we have taken because they realise just how important it is to get this situation remedied. They give us the same number of seats, a higher percentage of the vote than at the last election. And I mean, as for Sinn Féin's success, that's more as a result of the collapse of the SDLP vote within the nationalist community, which inflated the Sinn Féin's number of seats and reduced the SDLP seats. So, I mean, what happens in the nationalist community and the voting patterns in the nationalist community should not determine what we do in terms of our strategy to ensure that we remain part of the United Kingdom.
So Sammy, does that mean you're never going to go back in? Because unless Rishi Sunak's government revisits the post-Brexit deal settlement, there doesn't seem to be any prospect that you're going to go back in. And if Labour win the election next year, they're probably going to give even more powers back to the EU.
Well, I mean, first of all, as far as what we do in the immediate future, that's something that we'll discuss. But we're not prepared to go back and implement the Windsor Framework. I think the Windsor Framework is going to start to fall apart very, very quickly. Already, many of the trade groups who supported it in Northern Ireland now realise that what was they were told by the Prime Minister was simply not true. The claims that were made for the changes that the Windsor Framework would bring about in terms of restrictions to trade are proving not to be the case. And indeed, the government is now, as a result of the Windsor Framework and other decisions, now preparing not just to have border control posts in Northern Ireland for goods coming from GB into this part of the United Kingdom, but is now, by the autumn, also going to put up border control posts at ports in Britain to stop and check goods coming from Northern Ireland into the United Kingdom, into GB. So we're going to have double sets of border control posts. We're going to find that restrictions have not been removed. And of course, the whole issue of EU law still applying in Northern Ireland and EU court decisions applying in Northern Ireland will still continue. And of course, this is the other thing that many MPs in Westminster are now beginning to realise as well. The Windsor Framework and the terms of the Windsor Framework will restrict the ability of the UK government to make decisions about what happens in the rest of the UK. Hence the reason why, of course, we've got now a slimmed down retained EU law bill. One of the reasons for that is the Windsor Framework. And I think that many people who voted for Brexit are now realising that the Prime Minister has sold them a pup.
All right, fascinating stuff. Sammy, thank you. Sammy Wilson, the Chief Whip of the Democratic Unionist Party there. After the break, we're going to be talking about Ollie Willoughby and Philip Schofield. See how enthusiastic I am about that. I've been on the show loads of times. I've got my opinion on them. You must have met them loads of times.
Many, many times, yeah. But the thing is, if you were this morning viewers, stay tuned to us. We're on at the same time, and we're much more interesting, much more provocative, and we don't take it out on each other. We just have a lively debate.
At least not on the telly. All of that to come. This is To The Point on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Deebs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nah, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 10:26. You're with To The Point on GB News with me, Andrew Pearce, and Bev Turner.
Let's have a look at some of your views this morning. Before we move on, a lot of you getting in touch about the Suella Braverman speeding issue. Michael has said Suella paid the fine, took the points, job done, move on. If all ministers were to lose their jobs over asking a question, then they're all in trouble.
And Peter says if Suella Braverman is sacked or resigns, the Tory party's finished. She's got massive support from millions of working-class people.
And Brian has said if Sunak fails to back Suella, then he is toast. He's already lost my vote. Too weak to run a chip shop. Do you know what I do hope it does? I hope it makes her think twice about a surveillance state and all those cameras on every lamppost, because this is what it feels like, Suella Braverman, when you've got cameras everywhere. You get caught out doing things you shouldn't be doing.
Yeah, well,
Right.
now, look, on some other morning TV programme, can't think why anybody would be looking at anyone other than this programme, Alison Hammond and Dermot O'Leary have stepped into the breach following the crisis at ITV over the departure, the booting out, frankly, of Philip Schofield. He didn't quit.
I very much doubt it.
He was fired. Of course he was.
It's funny, the picture on the paper, front page of the paper, he had his mum in the car with him all day. Why was he got his mum in the picture?
Of course, don't forget, his brother was sent to prison on Friday for 12 years for abusing a teenage boy. So very hard for Mum.
Awful.
Her own son is in prison, and her other son is lost his job, or he's quit his job. Schofield announced on Saturday he was stepping down from presenting the ITV talk show with immediate effect. But actually, as Eamon Holmes had some thoughts on this situation this morning, he takes a different view.
It's fakery, and you know, sometimes you can only judge people by their actions, and you can only speak as you find. And there's some people who find Philip Schofield the nicest person in the whole world. I personally didn't, but I do believe speak as you find.
I also think, who cares if he's a nice person or not? Plenty of people in this industry aren't nice people. There's more to it, this story, than meets the eye. And what I want to know is why suddenly things have changed. Why have they fallen out? What's behind it? Because I think, personally, that's the story.
She made her name on the back of him.
Yes, but if he's done something that she doesn't want to be associated with, and she said, either he goes or I go, is that stabbing someone in the back? Or is that saying, hang on, I have my own professional integrity, and I don't want to be associated
excuse
with
me, if she has her own professional integrity, why isn't she coming out in public and saying, I have my own professional integrity, he has done something which will reflect badly on me, but she, again, is being as false as he is, and nobody is talking about the elephant in the room, and that's it. She says, I thank him, and I take this into account, for all his knowledge, his experience, and his humour, all the things that she didn't have when she came to the show, right? Well, it's absolutely true. It's absolutely true. So she used that, so I would call that stabbing in the back.
Well, that was, of course, our very own Eamon Holmes.
I don't think I'd say stabbing in the back. I'd say stabbing in the front.
Well, she could do worse, though, because she could really throw him under the bus, couldn't she, this morning? She isn't at the moment, but we have a reporter outside Television Centre in West London where this morning is filmed. Good morning. Lisa Hartle, are you there? Hello, Lisa.
Hello, yes,
hello.
Good morning. Yeah,
what more do we know?
Isn't it?
Say again.
It's all very dramatic how this all came about. So on Saturday, like you say, we heard Philip Schofield would no longer be presenting this morning after over 20 years of presenting, 13 of those with his co-presenter Holly Willoughby. On Instagram, he posted a statement in which he said the programme had become the story and he wanted to do what he could to protect the show that he loved. And as you say, over the weekend we saw that he was pictured with his mum in Cornwall, which is where he grew up, and there are reports that he's completely broken after being asked to leave after over 20 years of working on the show. It's reported as well that he was told he would no longer be working there after presenting on Thursday, so just minutes after he finished that broadcast, he was told that news. Holly Willoughby, who has been presenting with him for 13 years, will remain on the show, though she's taking a 2-week break and due back on the 5th of June. Dermot O'Leary and Alison Hammond, who usually present on a Friday, they'll be presenting today. Contenders to take over could be people like Ryland Clark, Josie Gibson, and of course Alison Hammond, amongst many other names that are being thrown around. But Philip Schofield, ITV, said he will be presenting the British Soap Awards next month, and as well as a new high-rating show that's due to be announced.
OK, Lisa, thank you so much. Lisa Hartle in West London, outside Television Centre. Now, we were just saying, because you see, the thing is, Holly and Phil, right, they were the nation's sweethearts, weren't they?
They weren't
Everybody
mine.
loved them.
Well, they weren't mine.
They weren't mine either, particularly. I went on that show a lot. They were relatively pleasant. Philip Schofield was pretty much a closed book. Like, he was a very private man.
Yeah.
You know, I'd go in and there were sort of friends of mine had bought a house near him, and I said, oh, you might know, they've just bought the house. And he'd look at me like he didn't want me to know where he lived. And then he moved, actually, just a few streets from me, and I said, oh, you live in a few... But it was like... I didn't, at the time, before anything, it was almost like he was hiding things. Like, he was never very open. He just wasn't a straightforward person. There's always something going, all right, he's very famous, and maybe he's thinking, I don't want to chat to you, you're no one, fair enough. But there was just a veneer about him that was inauthentic, hiding.
And then, of course, he came out, didn't he, a couple of years ago?
Yeah, but
gay.
even after that,
Yeah.
even after he came out as gay, he was still very... bit shifty.
I have to say, it was hardly a major surprise to many of us that Philip Schofield was, in fact, gay.
Well...
I interviewed him 25 years ago at the Times. I nearly fell through the floor when he told me he had a girlfriend.
There were rumours, yeah, you're right, around for a long time. But, you see, Holly, interestingly... See, I said this story was boring, and now I'm having a really good gossip. Holly has been on a bit of a journey herself recently. If you watch, she's set up this brand called Wild Moon. Oh, we've got to stop gossiping and go to some proper news.
The Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, is giving a speech. It's obviously a Labour order because that's happened.
Thank you. Thank you, Wes. Thank you all for being here. It is fantastic to be in Braintree. I've got very fond memories of this part of the world because 16 happy years ago, I got married just down the road in the Fens. So that's why it's got this special place in my heart. And almost as good as that, this is where 2 weeks ago, at the local elections, the Labour Party was back on the march in Essex. But today I'm here to speak about something that's fundamental to the Labour Party, fundamental to our purpose of working people, the NHS. Just look at it. The 8 o'clock scramble, the appointments missed, opportunities missed, to spot the pain that turned out to be a tumour. Patients who want to go home are well enough to go home, but who have to stay in hospital for months, waiting for a care package. Day-long waits in A&E. Record numbers off work, sick. People pulling their own teeth out. 7 million on waiting lists, and ambulances for heart attacks and stroke victims that don't come on time. Just think about that for a second. Ambulances that don't come. Can any of you imagine losing someone in that way? I can't. And I mean that in every sense. I can't imagine it. It shouldn't be possible in our country, but it is. A cruel lottery of who lives and who dies that the NHS was founded to stop. And until now, until this point, for 75 years, it has. It's one of the greatest privileges of being born in Britain, certainly for all of my life. The knowledge that if you get ill, if you have a serious accident, you'll get the care that you need, whatever your circumstances. Not every country has a system like that. And the insecurity, the fear without it, is huge. Nye Bevan, the Labour Health Secretary who created the NHS, put it best. He said, illness is neither an indulgence for which people have to pay, nor an offence for which they should be penalised. That's what we believe, and it's under threat. I mean it. I don't think the NHS survives 5 more years of Tory government. And people say, oh, well, we've heard this before. The Labour Party is always saying it's time to save the NHS. But I say, look squarely in the eyes of the people who work in the NHS, who serve the NHS, and ask them. Speak to the working people who use the NHS, who depend on the NHS, who need the NHS. What do they say? And go to the people who believe in the NHS, love the NHS, but have been forced to buy the care they need from the private sector. Listen to them. No, at the next election, the NHS is on the line. The Conservative Party that's brought it to its knees will put it in the ground. But mark my words, if all we do in the Labour Party is to place the NHS on a pedestal and leave it there, that's not good enough either. We've got to fix the fundamentals, renew its purpose, make it fit for the future. That's what this mission is about, a new direction for the NHS. To say to the British people, vote Labour, problem solved, would be an insult to everyone's intelligence. Patients can see how deep the problems go. My approach is different. It starts with the cause, the central project. How do we serve working people? And then it asks, what do we value? What do we conserve, cherish and protect? The answer, a public and universal health system, free at the point of use, paid for by general taxation, the NHS. But then it asks, what do we need to change? What are the challenges, the opportunities? How can we save lives, improve lives, provide more dignity? Innovation, where can it be found? People, how do we unlock their purpose? Technology, how do we make it work for us? And when you've asked those searching questions, you turn back, you roll up your sleeves, or you face reality. And the reality is this: the NHS is not sustainable unless we make serious, deep, long-term changes. That's my politics. Reform for renewal, national missions for the common good, and NHS fit for the future. Now, some people will tell you it's purely a question of money, and money is a part of it. I don't deny that. Like any opposition, we will set out our plans before the election. And like any incoming government, we will make decisions based on a full appreciation of the reality, the state of our NHS and our public finances. But what's more important now, I really believe this, is to show our recipe for reform, to put forward a vision of a renewed NHS that can make the most of the money we invest in it. I've run a public service. I know that money makes a difference, but it only gets you so far. You can't look at the problems now and tell me it's just about money. That's not serious. You can't ignore the fact the world has changed. That's denying the evidence before our eyes. The British people are living longer. Life expectancy in 1948 was 68. Today it's over 81. That is a good thing, but it brings new challenges. The nature of disease is different. Instead of urgent and acute hospital care, now it's more about managing chronic long-term conditions. The wonder of science has taught us, with ever-increasing clarity, that our health depends on how we live. Mental health has stepped out of the shadows, and thank goodness. And with artificial intelligence, with personalised medicine, with new vaccines, we stand on the cusp of a revolution that could transform healthcare for the better. My message today is this: science and technology are the game changers. This is the prize. This is what it gives us. An NHS where prevention comes first, where care is closer to home, where patients have more control. So, to everyone working in the NHS today, serving on the front line, I say thank you. Thank you. Without you, there would be no light at the end of the tunnel. But I also say, The walk towards that light will be hard, will feel challenging, difficult. But do not doubt it's essential and that the reward for reform will be worth it.
The Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, don't forget the knighthood, setting out his party's policy plans for the NHS. Do you agree with him? Send us your views, gbviews@gbnews.com.
You really enjoyed that speech by Sir Keir Starmer, didn't you?
He's so boring, isn't he? He said the world at his feet. He's got a terrible voice, a really irritating nasal tone. He was a really polished, high-powered lawyer. Why is he so boring?
Tell us what you really think, Andrew Pierce. Tell us what you really think. Right, still to come. More Phil and Holly drama. We didn't get to the end of our gossip stories about them. Plus, drug driving overtakes drink driving as 80 people are caught every day, but they don't always get banged to rights. We're going to be debating those stories next. This is The Point on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton Tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m. Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pierce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's, what time is it? 10:45. This is The Point of GB News, Andrew Pierce and Bev Turner. In the studio, we have the A-team. Kevin Maguire from the Daily Mirror, well, B+. And A+, Amanda Patel, my great friend and colleague from Daily Mail.
Morning, both. Right, our top story that we're discussing this morning. We've been gossiping a little bit today about Phil and Holly. Amanda, do you have a strong opinion on this? I've no doubt every morning you're watching us, not that.
Actually, I record your show because often I'm working then, but I watch it afterwards. That's beside the point. Very strong view about Phil and Holly. OK, and Andrew and I, we have a bit of a kind of an understanding of this. Andrew and I have been friends for 25 years.
Yeah.
And we've worked together for most of that time, like Phil and Holly.
Been on holiday like Phil and Holly?
We've been all the time on... Geez, how many holidays have we been on?
I even cost you a job.
Weekends. He was at my place last night having tomatoes on toast, right?
I also cost her a job.
And he got me sacked. He got me sacked, OK?
Yeah.
He destroyed my career. And inadvertently. And I still love him.
Yeah.
And what I don't understand about the Phil and Holly thing is, that is, if you've been friends for that long, and I think that pink heart said everything about her.
So just to be clear what the pink heart is.
OK, the pink heart emoji means girl power.
So she did a statement in which she said, the sofa will be empty without you and my heart is broken. And she put a little emoji...
Even though she kicked him off the sofa.
Symbol on a text message at the end.
And the whole thing that I think about this is really disgusting is, if you're friends through thick and thin, as we have been.
Yeah.
And if you... and she didn't stand by him in the end. She completely shafted him. And I think that the other thing that really upsets me about this is the whole way that, you know, this quote that came out for weeks and weeks saying, what Holly wants, Holly gets. Who was the last person who said that?
Meghan.
Exactly. She is a complete madam.
She's the Meghan Markle of British broadcasting.
She is the Meghan Markle of British broadcasting.
Kevin.
I'm always I'm always wary of portraying powerful women. I don't want to mansplain this, but there's always the kind of wicked lady. But what you can see here is the power relationship is completely shifted. It was Phil and Holly, then it became Holly and Phil, really, but everyone was still calling them Phil and Holly. She's grown up, he's grown up. And she's grown out. She became...
shafted him.
And Eamon Holmes...
And would you do that to a friend?
Yeah.
Would I do that to Andrew?
Depends what he's done behind the scenes. I mean...
But Eamon made the point, didn't he, that when she came onto the TV screen, she knew nothing.
Yep.
She gained experience, skill, all
That's what I did with you. You knew hardly anything. When I took
oh,
you under my wing,
he
and then
grimaced.
What do I get? My arm broken.
He grimaced.
Well, you see, she set up this business recently called Wild Moon, and whether you know, on Instagram, and it's all about empowerment, and it's all about. I mean, it's a lot of like you light a candle and suddenly you feel good about the world. But she's been on a bit of a spiritual journey recently, and I don't use that word lightly.
That silly actress with her loop.
She's been on a commercial. She's been on a commercial journey.
Exactly. And what she should be doing, is launching a big website where she shows you how to sharpen knives.
No, but I'm sorry, but if you've been the co-presenter and you've been a little bit of fluff with your more sort of meaty male co-presenter for 15 years, whatever she's been with Philip Schofield.
20, yeah.
And she has grown up. That's the phrase to use, actually.
I can see like there's
now
other.
I see. She's like, no, hang on a minute. This isn't about you anymore, and I'm all right with that.
There have been events in his life that she's been troubled by. Also, she left the talent agency 3 years ago. That he's a
shareholder
of. There must have been a bit of tension there. I think she took £1 million with her. There must, and you can see it building.
Managed by her husband.
Yeah, and just
only got one interest in Holly.
We can marinate over this as long as we like. The truth is, they were friends for a very long time, and she shafted him.
Yeah.
What Holly wanted, Holly got, and I think it's unconscionable, especially given the difficulty he's going through. And I look at pictures of Philip Schofield now, and I'm worried about him.
Yeah.
And a friend should be worried.
Really?
Yeah, I'm really worried about him.
But don't you think this... So what do you think she should have done then? Should she have come out and defended him?
No, she should have just gone on with the show. Like you guys do. You just be professional. You come in 4 days a week, you do your show, you stand by someone who's going through tough times. If Andrew was going through tough times, you would nurture him, you would support him, you'd help him through.
And is she throwing him under a bus because his brother got sent to prison for paedophile abuse of a teenager?
The whole narrative underneath it all is that she felt that her brand was being tarnished. Now, whatever happened, Philip Schofield is not the one who was convicted. You know,
Does it depend what comes out now, though, Amanda? If something comes out which is more damning on Philip Schofield and what he's been doing behind the scenes, would you then say, well, fair dues, Holly, you distanced yourself from him and you needed to?
No, I just think you stick by your friends. Simple as that.
Kevin, what do you think?
I think if stuff, you know, there's a lot of unanswered questions, but there was looked as if there was a very warm friendship, which is not now. You know, it's now Ice Age.
And somebody was leaking against Schofield day and night, particularly in the Sun newspaper and the Daily Mail.
Yeah, all the briefing was in her favour and against him. But then events in his life in recent years have been troubled, not so in hers. And also because you've had a long relationship at work and they're colleagues who became friends.
Yeah.
Rather than friends who became colleagues.
Yeah.
I don't think these things last forever.
But that's
I'm less upset than you. I know it's captivated the nation.
Because Andrew and I are going to be friends forever.
Yeah.
You know, when I lost my brother, my parents said, God sent me Andrew. I mean, they could have chosen someone else, but you know, but they sent me Andrew to be my mate. There's nothing that would
you would die in the
us.
ditch, wouldn't you, for your closest friend?
Yeah, for your closest friend, yes, you would. Yeah, and
go on holiday
family
together,
members.
They went on holiday together. So much shared between them in a way you don't normally expect with TV presenters to spend that much time together.
No, look.
And Eamon Holmes is pretty clear. He worked there. He knows these people.
Yeah, but you can't. You know, people do fall out. People and families fall out. You mentioned Meghan Markle. Look how close that family was, and Harry, the royal family, right? And they were massively embraced at the beginning. That family. Then they fell out.
Get me started on the royal family, okay?
Have I kicked you off?
I'm going to your column today. Where's the camera? Okay.
Kevin Maguire writes a very fine column in the Mirror on
says
Monday.
in his column.
I've not written about Phil and Ollie.
He says, backing for the Republican movement after Charles's coronation, which cost £250 million, boo-hoo.
That's a lot of money.
Is now, you say, almost 1 in 3 people want us to dump the royals.
Yep. They're up to 28%, Ipsos Mori, highest in 30 years. It's becoming mainstream now.
So that means how many 28 want to get rid of it, which means 72% want to keep it?
Yeah, unfortunately, it's a work in progress, but it's giving hope.
Long way
I tell you,
to go.
Your £250 million Gold Coast traffic jam in London wasn't as popular as you think.
Kevin went He claims he was in Turkey or Greece.
I was in Greece.
He was in Cuba, in the People's Republic.
Did you watch it, Kevin?
People's Republic of Cuba.
Must have watched it.
No, I deliberately went on holiday and missed the build-up, and I was in Republican Greece, which got rid of its royal family, confirmed it in a referendum in 1974.
Yeah.
And I came back afterwards when everybody had cleared. There was a lot of rubbish left around.
Kevin Maguire would think that
I saw it on the news.
30% of people wanting to get rid of the monarchy is something to cheer about. I love your
revolution,
Kevin. Yeah. I love it.
It's the age of enlightenment.
Can we do this story, right? This is about drug driving, overtaking drink driving. This is amazing. It's one of those things, Amanda, that you feel has been going on behind the scenes for a while. People are having a spliff, having a line of coke, getting behind the wheel of the car. Police haven't kept up with this trend, have they?
What's a spliff?
Stop.
Like smoking weed.
Bev, would you like to confess anything here?
No!
Live on TV?
I've got teenagers, I know all the lingo.
Listen, I can tell you, I tried it once, I fell asleep.
Not behind the wheel, but this is
No, I wasn't
people
driving
are doing
like
that behind the wheel, aren't they?
I know it's a problem. I think I'm it's hard to detect. It doesn't really get me going, I'm afraid.
It is a serious point, isn't it, Amanda?
No,
For
it
the
is,
people
but
who
it
say
is.
legalise cannabis, decriminalise cannabis, if they're now driving cars 80 a day that we know of, and if the tangled wreckage of a car caused by somebody driving cannabis, isn't that why we've got to keep the rules as it is?
You told me the condition on which I came in today is we're going to talk about fun things.
Yeah.
OK? And
But it is a Daily Mail story.
It happens. I don't...
This is a Daily Mail exclusive, Kevin. I think this is a really important issue, actually, because if you've got, you know, if 80 people a day are being caught guilty of being found to be driving under the influence of drugs, and we aren't testing them, they're not being found guilty.
Yeah, because as the Mail explains, I think it is an important issue here. There are actually, at the moment, more prosecutions for drink driving than drug driving. There's 33,000 a year drink driving. There's nearly 18,000 for drug driving. However, police chiefs say drug driving is more prevalent across the UK than drink driving because it's seen as more socially acceptable by some people. most people just don't drink drive. I remember in the 60s and 70s it was considered socially acceptable, in truth. If you got caught, people would think, oh, you're unlucky. Now you think you're stupid and, you know, and you could have killed somebody.
And the government did a big health campaign, a big public health campaign.
Absolutely, and it worked. But on drugs, it's very difficult to detect as well. It takes about 4 months for a test to come through. You've got to be prosecuted if there's a case against you within 6 months of being stopped. So we need a very quick, instant drug test.
You can't even come round when your house gets broken into.
And it feels like we need, and I hate to say it, but it does feel like we need a new campaign, a government campaign about drug driving. People think they're okay to have it.
Somebody off their head should not be behind the wheel, because you can kill.
Kevin McBride, I've known him for a long time. He's often
that is the most banal thing I've ever heard you say. God, are you going to get better during this show?
I don't know.
Talking Republicans off with his head.
We need to move on. Kevin, Amanda, thank you so much. Up next, the pressure is piling up on Home Secretary Suella Braverman over her speeding fine, but is it all just a political stitch-up? We're GB News, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 11 o'clock on Monday, the 22nd of May. This is To The Point on GB News with Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce.
Speeding Suella, yes, she's under pressure. The Prime Minister is apparently consulting his ethics advisor over whether the Home Secretary, who wanted to do a speed driving awareness course on her own, whether that breached the ministerial rules. And if so, is she on the way out of the Cabinet? I hope not.
The fight over the NHS. Sunak promises a new app. Of course he does. Starmer promises new targets as NHS Scotland offers junior doctors a 14% pay deal. What do you think of that?
And the latest Some Other Morning TV show, you might have heard of it. Is this the end of the road for Philip Schofield? All that to come, on To The Point.
Be aware, we've got a new email address. I didn't even know that until we came on air this morning. It's gbviews@gbnews.com. So get in touch with us this morning. Let us know your thoughts on everything we're discussing. But first of all, here's your news with Tamsin Roberts.
Bev, thanks very much and good morning from the GB newsroom. It's 1 minute past 11. The Home Secretary's conduct over her speeding fine will be addressed by the Prime Minister when he speaks to his ethics advisor. Suella Braverman has been accused of breaching the ministerial code following claims she asked for help in arranging a private speed awareness course. It's alleged she also tried to avoid getting points on her driving licence. Rishi Sunak, who was asked about her handling of the matter while in Japan for the G7 summit, will seek advice on whether there should be an inquiry. Shadow Public Health Minister Andrew Gwynne says she needs to go.
Look, I've got real frustration here about this because at a time of a cost of living crisis that people want real answers to, at the time that our NHS is on its knees and needs fixing, we're here yet again talking about another Tory minister who has sought to bend the rules, play the system for their own advantage. Of course, she needs to face an ethics advisor. I would go further. I think Rishi Sunak needs to show some leadership and show her the door.
Labour has warned the NHS won't survive 5 more years of a Conservative government. Setting out his vision for the health service, Sir Keir Starmer promised to get the NHS back on its feet if his party wins the next election. His plans include reducing NHS waiting lists, committing to hitting the 4-hour A&E target and improving ambulance response times by 2030.
At the next election, the NHS is on the line. The Conservative Party that's brought it to its knees will put it in the ground. But mark my words, if all we do in the Labour Party is to place the NHS on a pedestal and leave it there, that's not good enough either. We've got to fix the fundamentals, renew its purpose, make it fit for the future.
Calls are being made for every work-related suicide to be investigated by the Health and Safety Executive. It follows the death of head teacher Ruth Perry, who took her own life in January. Her family believes she was stressed because of an Ofsted inspection. Writing in the British Medical Journal, 2 academics say the profession has a duty to demand action to tackle the burden of mental health. Russia's Wagner group of mercenaries has announced plans to leave Ukraine's eastern city of Bakhmut. The group's founder says forces will retreat from the 25th of May until the 1st of June. It's after Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky dismissed claims by the paramilitary organisation that it had successfully taken the city. A warning is being issued over a number of new sophisticated scams. Consumer group Which says at least 4 are doing the rounds. They include fake PayPal and missing person appeals, fraudulent app alerts and pig butchering, which was given its name because fraudsters so-called fatten up the victim by forming a romantic connection before executing the financial part of the scam. The government plans to work with Ofcom to use new technology to clamp down on the spoofing of legitimate phone numbers. Nearly a third of young survivors of the Manchester Arena bombing received no professional support, with a report finding their experiences weren't validated by adults in positions of care. 22 people were killed when a suicide bomber detonated his device at the Ariana Grande concert 6 years ago. The Be the Difference report showed 3/4 of children at the event were mentally affected by the attack, but professional support wasn't offered to to 4 in 10 of them. The son of murdered soldier Lee Rigby has raised £40,000 to honour his father. Rigby was 25 when he was attacked by extremists in Woolwich in south-east London in 2013. 12-year-old Jack is raising money on behalf of the charity Scotty's Little Soldiers, which helps support bereaved children. The average house price has reached a record high this month after jumping by just over £6,500. Property website Rightmove says the average asking price for a home in Britain is around £373,000. The 1.8% month-on-month rise is the biggest of the year so far. Rightmove says the hyper-local market is still price-sensitive and buyer affordability remains stretched, but there is now increasing confidence from sellers. This is GB News. More from me shortly. Now, though, it's back to Andrew and Bev.
Good morning, it's 11:06. So Labour and the Lib Dems are calling for an investigation into Suella Braverman after she sought advice about arranging a private speed awareness course.
The leaking of the stories raised concerns of a Whitehall plot by the Blob, I would call it, to take out Tory Brexiteers. Don't forget last month Dominic Raab was forced to resign as Justice Secretary over bullying allegations.
Let's get more analysis from political editor at The Express Online, David Maddox. This morning, good morning, David, you've written an article about this. What's your take on it?
Well, I mean, first of all, I struggled to see what she'd really done wrong when I first looked at the story. I mean, she's got a speeding ticket and she's asked for a bit of advice. But it doesn't look like she's really asked people to intervene on her behalf, and it seems to be minor stuff. But you know, I had a meeting with an ex-civil servant who's just recently left the civil service in the last couple of weeks, who you know, was talking to me about how there is an agenda against Brexiteers, how there is an agenda against the Conservative government, how they want a Labour government. And, you know, he said, join the dots. Look at that as far back as the bullying allegations against Priti Patel.
Yeah.
Look at what happened to Boris. Look what happened to Dom Raab and some others as well. And, you know, it's always the Brexiteers who are being targeted.
And she's a prominent Brexiteer. She's a prominent right-winger. She's taking a very tough line on immigration. And if we believe what we read in last week, she's consistently been blocked by fellow members of the cabinet who don't, for instance, the Education Secretary. No, we've got to have loads more students in, and if it means that foreign students, if it means they can bring their entire family, so be it, because it's all about promoting our universities. And if he was to get rid of her, he's got a very dangerous enemy on the back benches, and who then would be the genuine Tory Brexiteer right-wing radical in the cabinet apart from Michael Gove?
Well, I'm not sure Michael Gove is a genuine right-wing radical. He may be a radical, but I don't think the right of the party would recognise him as one of our own anymore, even if he spoke at the NatCon conference last week. But there wouldn't be anybody. And I think it'd be a serious problem for Sunak, actually. Already a great deal of unhappiness about policies is they're not convinced he's going to deal with the immigration, legal or illegal. They're certainly not convinced on the legal immigration side. He appeared to water that down last week himself whilst he was in Japan. And, you know, there's a lot of dissatisfaction. I spoke to MPs after the whole EU retained law debacle who were discussing putting letters in. You know, we're back to that.
We thought that they were going to get rid of 2,000 laws by the end of the year. Rishi Sunak, in his leadership campaign last summer, said there'd be a review within 100 days. We'll be lucky if they get rid of 500 of these laws this year.
And you've also got to remember that Suella was crucial for him to become leader.
Well, remind me why.
This is, I mean, you know, he spent a lot of time wooing her in that kind of run-up when Boris was trying to make the comeback. And then I think it was a Sunday afternoon, Suella declared for Rishi Sunak. And, you know, a few hours later, Boris Johnson pulled the plug on his comeback. And I've been told by a number of sources that Suella's support for Rishi was absolutely crucial in that. He felt that without her, he couldn't get the breadth of the party and unite the party if he tried to come back. So he quit. And, you know, so this is why she got the Home Secretary role. That's why, I was told that he promised her that she would be able to bring down immigration numbers, that she'd be able to do what she wanted on illegal immigration. Well, that seems to be falling apart now as well. But if she goes, there's nobody on the right to be a champion for him.
Do you put this down to the blob, the civil servants? They got rid of the former education secretary, bullying allegations. Civil servants. Dominic Raab, they got rid of him, the justice secretary, bullying allegations. They failed to get rid of Priti Patel because Boris Johnson stuck by her, refused to sack her. Now she's in the firing line.
But of course they got rid of Boris as well, because those leaks came from the civil service. And or a lot of those leaks came from the civil service. Yes, I think this is part of it. And it's no coincidence that she had a good week last week. She made quite a powerful speech at the National Conservatism Conference. She dug in on the immigration numbers, and then suddenly she's the one being targeted with what really is a very minor offence.
The sort of the left-leaning, our political commentator earlier was talking about, the sort of more left-leaning, let's say, Conservatives in this country who don't like her rhetoric, who don't like her anti-immigration stance, who sit around the posh dinner parties of Islington and might...
She talks about swarms, doesn't she?
And the language, and they say that she uses this dehumanising language around immigration. They will like it if Rishi Sunak kicks her out.
Oh, yes.
But that isn't the electorate that he needs to win over at the moment. It's those who see themselves as right or centre-right.
Absolutely. He needs to also dig in on the red wall seats. He's got to do more than, as much as I love the guy, he's got to do more than put Lee Anderson in the deputy chairmanship role to win over those seats. Very fine man, absolutely. But it's he needs to tackle the immigration issue. Suella is his ticket for doing that, and of course that's why the left of the party. I mean, when we talk about the liberal left of the Conservative Party, we're talking about Conservative MPs whose first choice of paper is probably more the Guardian or the Times than it is the Express or the Mail. Which, so it's and pleasing that group, who make up the vast majority of his cabinet anyway, won't win him election. It may not keep him in office.
But the thing is, repeatedly I keep thinking he's not that bothered about winning an election. I know that sounds... I'm not sure he's that bothered. I just think it looks like his heart isn't in it. It looks like he's got one foot out the door to me. It's like the decisions that he seems to make look like maybe on a personal level for him, he knows this is it and he'll be gone.
I've never met a politician who didn't want to win an election, especially a Prime Minister, because there's nothing, there's one thing going out as Prime Minister who's won a mandate from the people. There's another thing going out as Prime Minister who was put in by his colleagues and then never won a mandate at all, not even from party members.
Gordon Brown, Jim Callaghan, they never won a mandate. They were Prime Minister, but they never won a mandate from the people. Just quickly, David, will this be done today? Tomorrow? How quickly do we know whether Braverman carries on in her job?
Well,
talks to the ethics advisor, Sir Laurie Magnus.
I would imagine that there's going to be some sort of investigation announced again.
Surely not.
I would be surprised if there isn't. Not because I think there should be, but because that seems to be the way of things. And then it will, it'll be dragged out for a few weeks. But of course, she's got to get through Home Office questions. I suspect there's going to be the PM will probably give a statement on the G7 summit, and this will come up.
I think he comes after her, doesn't he?
It does, yeah. So it's it's certainly going to drag through the day. I suspect it will be a few weeks before we know something, but who knows? It might.
Honestly. All right, David. That's David Maddox, political editor at Express Online. He's written a very powerful piece today about all of this.
The world is literally on fire, and these politicians. Don't know what that was. These politicians are... We're still working, you can still hear me. And these politicians are bothered about whether she asked whether she could do a speed awareness course on her own or in a group.
Which she didn't do in the end, and she paid the fine and she did the points.
Anyway, let us know what you think. gbviews@gbnews.com. Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer are laying out their visions for the NHS today.
In the last hour, the Labour leader's been giving a speech, it was exciting, on what he'd do to the NHS when he got to Downing Street, and predictably, of course, attacking the government's record.
It's one of the greatest privileges of being born in Britain, certainly for all of my life. The knowledge that if you get ill, if you have a serious accident, you'll get the care that you need, whatever your circumstances. Not every country has a system like that, and the insecurity, the fear without it, is huge. Nye Bevan, the Labour Health Secretary who created the NHS, put it best. He said, "Illness is neither an indulgence for which people have to pay, nor an offence for which they should be penalised." That's what we believe, and it's under threat. I mean it. I don't think the NHS survives 5 more years of Tory government.
But of course, Rishi Sunak, meanwhile, guess what he's promising? A new app. Of course he is, which will help ease pressure on waiting lists. Let's get some analysis from the CEO of Same Day Doctor, Dr. Lawrence Gurlis. Good morning, Lawrence. Lovely to see you. Good morning.
Yeah.
So we've got two different sort of ambitions here. A little bit brushstrokes from Keir Starmer as to how he would fix the NHS. Rishi Sunak wants us to use an app. Who do you think at the moment has the right idea to save something that is very, very dear to most of us?
Neither of them, I'm afraid. I think it was Keir Starmer who said a few weeks ago the NHS is broken. I think he pretty much repeated it in that speech. It is broken, and you can blame whatever politicians you like. I think it's probably 75 years in the making. I actually don't blame politicians. I blame the public, whose expectations are far too high. And they have shunned alternative systems, and I blame the medical profession, because I think the medical profession is being hypocritical. We have doctors saying, I can earn more money in Australia, but when you point out to them Australia has a social insurance system, mixed private-public partnership, they tend to avoid that. I try to have debates with UK doctors about moving away from a taxpayer-funded system, and I get shouted down. But those same-day doctors are off on a plane to Australia tomorrow because they can earn more money. So I'd look beyond the politicians for the solution. I think it's up to us. It's up to us, the patients, to say what sort of health service we want and what we're prepared to pay for. Talking about this app, you mentioned that. I think that's just another soundbite. But anyway, Andrew, let me.
Well, I was going to ask you, look, one of the big crises, Lawrence, you don't need me to tell you that, is with GP, getting in to see your GP. We know when we had some of these strikes, the number of people calling GPs collapsed, the number of people calling ambulances collapsed. Is the answer, has some political party got to have the courage to say there will be a charge, maybe of £5 or £10 to see your GP unless you're on benefits?
Yes, but I think that would be political suicide. I think the politicians know that. I've spoken to politicians, they know that. And that's the problem. And therefore, you blame the public because the politicians know it wouldn't work. Therefore, the public have voted for this current system. And the public are in essence, voting to accept a third-rate system that doesn't work. We're seeing excess deaths at the moment, 2,500 people per week dying in excess. That's nothing to do with COVID or the vaccines. That's because the health service has stopped working.
But I was just going to say, just on free at the point of delivery, which was the great clarion call of the NHS when it was launched, Lawrence, 1948. Yeah. But if you go to a NHS dentist now, well, good luck if you can find one. But if you do have one, you're charged for a filling, you're charged for treatment, and it's hundreds of pounds.
Yeah. Well, I've had a simple solution for this. If people have all sorts of objections, I've said this many times. Why don't we do away with all prescription exemptions, reduce the prescription fee to a modest level, instead of £9.50 per item, make it £1 or £2 per item. Then people will value the medications. I go around to patients' houses, they have medicine cabinets full of wasted medicines. We waste everything in the NHS. So that would be one way of introducing user fees. Start at the pharmacy level. I know that people will complain, look, my brother has diabetes, I don't really want him to pay for his insulin, but if you paid £1 a month, £2 a month, that wouldn't be the end of the world. So look, from that point of view, there are solutions, but no one's bold enough to do it. We're coming up to an election. Everyone's just going to promise the earth and deliver nothing. In the meantime, patients are suffering, and indeed patients are dying, and that's really tragic.
Lawrence, if I can ask you then about these excess deaths, 2,500 a week we've got. It's been pretty much consistent since the beginning of this year. Are you surprised that Rishi Sunak isn't talking about that at all?
Yeah.
I'm surprised that no one's talking about it. It's not just Rishi Sunak. You know, when we had COVID, we had daily death rates. Why aren't they doing that now? You know, where are the Department of Health? Why aren't we analysing? Well, I'm telling you where the deaths are coming from. It's not older people. It's young people. It's men and women in their 40s and 50s. It's cancer. It's heart disease. It's things that were left undiagnosed and untreated during the pandemic when we became a national COVID service. And even now, because of strikes, because of other things, patients are not getting the health care they deserve. So yes, of course, everyone should be talking about that, and it's being swept under the carpet.
Do you think also, Lawrence, we talked about this several times on this show, this idea that actually people start having to take a bit more responsibility for their own health? And knowing that the majority of, we've got a generation of children now who are going to die before their parents, the first generation that will die before their parents because they are unfit and they eat too much. We've got to change the mindset of the whole country, haven't we?
Without a doubt, you've got, you might change your car every 10 years, but your body's got to last you 80 or 90 years. It is your job to look after it. But then I've been called a libertarian for saying that. But, it's up to us to look after our bodies. People talk about health inequalities between the rich and the poor. Most of that is down to poor diet, alcohol and smoking. It's not being poor in itself, except, of course, poorer people can't afford better food. But, most of health inequalities is down to poor diet and poor self-care. Exactly as you say, we need to look after our bodies. We've only got the one.
Yeah.
All right, that's Dr. Lawrence Gerlis. He's Chief Executive, Same Day Doctor. Thanks for joining us. He tells it as it is, doesn't he?
Yeah, I like that.
What's wrong with being a libertarian anyway?
No, nothing. I'm very much libertarian. Now, still to come. It's one drama after another unfolding at ITV, apparently, but you're watching us, so who cares? We'll get the latest on the ongoing Philip Schofield fallout. This is GB News.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things. We've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m. Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
the Jubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning. This is To The Point on GB News with Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. And you know what we're not? We're not this morning. We're not like them in any way, are we?
Not at all.
No, we're not. We're much better.
Harmony, peace and harmony on this channel amongst presenters.
But at least we're honest. That's what you get from us. And by all accounts this morning, Philip Schofield and Holly Willoughby have not been completely honest about their situation. This is what Eamon Holmes had to say this morning.
Yeah. Wield all this support because he's not the best presenter in the world. So why is he so invaluable?
Did they give you support when you left?
Absolutely
ITV?
not. I was out the door. I wasn't even given a reason why I was out the door. And people say, oh, you're bitter, whatever. I didn't get a text from either of those two, either one of them, to say, sorry it ended this way or good luck for the future.
And yet you sat on the sofa when he decided to come out.
Like everyone else, I was conned into him coming out to what it was all about and whatever. But that's all wasn't the real story.
Do you think one of the reasons, Eamon, that you weren't given a reason is Philip? Do you think he was one of the reasons?
Sorry, I can't hear you.
Do you think Philip was one of the reasons that you got rid of?
Well, he wouldn't have fought for me. I mean, it's a terrible cabal of people who run ITV Daytime, and indeed who run ITV. It has to be said, the Queen of Woke, Dame EasyJet, who runs it, and whether she can't stand me or Piers Morgan or anybody, she has a little type of presenter who I can name who are good and clean and squeaky and don't break the rules on anything, and that's all fine.
Which is why you and I will never get a job at ITV. Right, our London reporter is outside Television Centre in West London for us. Good morning, Lisa. How is the home of squeaky clean vanilla presenters who never upset anybody?
Good morning. Well, the first programme since Philip Schofield was announced that he would no longer be working on the programme has been underway this morning. Alison Hammond and Dermot O'Leary are presenting, and they've paid a tribute to Philip Schofield. Dermot O'Leary said, everyone on and off screen at ITV and this morning want to say a huge thank you to Phil for what he's done to make the show such a success over the last 21 years. Alison Hammond added, quite simply, we all know he's one of the best live television broadcasters this country has ever had, and all of the team wish him all the best for the future. So obviously that comes after Saturday when we learned that Philip Schofield would no longer be working on the programme. He took to Instagram and he left a statement there in which he said that he wanted to do all he could to protect the show that he loved and that the show had become more of the story. Over the weekend, we saw him pictured with his mum in Cornwall, which is where he grew up. And there's been reports that he's, completely broken after having to leave the show after over 21 years of presenting on there. Holly Willoughby, who's presented with him for the last 13 years, will remain on the show, but she's on a break for 2 weeks now and due back on the 5th of June. ITV have also confirmed that Philip Schofield will be presenting the front runner of a new series that is due to be announced, and he's also said that he's going to be presenting the British Soap Awards, which is due to take place next month.
Wow.
All right, that's
Thank
Lisa
you,
Hartle.
Lisa.
I always laugh at these statements. It's like when politicians are sacked from the cabinet and the Prime Minister writes a gushing warm letter saying how marvellous they've been. Why did you just sack them? Today you've got these statements saying how marvellous Philip Schofield is. Well, how comes he's been fired?
Well, that's what we mean. So it's all very insincere. It's all very inauthentic,
Now, up next, Kevin Maguire and Amanda Patel. They're going to be back with us. They're going to be talking about some of those top stories, including, this fascinates me, Jennifer Lawrence is exchanging heels for flip-flops in a bid not to fall over.
Is that really fascinating?
Apparently it's fascinating to Amanda. And do men prefer to take a seat when they have a wee? I don't think so. That's after your...
Andrew, thanks very much. Here are the headlines from the GB newsroom at 11:30. The Home Secretary's conduct over her speeding fine will be addressed by the Prime Minister when he speaks to his ethics advisor. Suella Braverman has been accused of breaching the ministerial code following claims she asked for help in arranging a private speed awareness course. It's alleged she also tried to avoid getting points on her driving licence. Rishi Sunak, who was asked about her handling of the matter while in Japan for the G7 summit, will seek advice on whether there should be an inquiry. Shadow Public Health Minister Andrew Gwynne says she needs to go. Labour has warned the NHS won't survive 5 more years of a Conservative government. Setting out his vision for the health service, Sir Keir Starmer promised to get the NHS back on its feet if his party wins the next election. He also said A&E wait times and ambulance response targets will be hit by 2030. Russia's Wagner group of mercenaries has announced plans to leave Ukraine's eastern city of Bakhmut. The group's founder says forces will retreat from the 25th of May until the 1st of June. It's after Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky dismissed claims by the paramilitary organisation that it had successfully taken the city. Consumer group Which has warned people to be aware of at least 4 sophisticated scams doing the rounds. They include fake PayPal and missing person appeals, fraudulent app alerts and pig butchering, which was given its name because fraudsters fatten up the victim by forming a romantic connection before executing the financial part of the scam. TV, online, DAB, digital and tune in. This is GB News.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2448 and €1.1504. The price of gold is £1,590 and 57 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100's at 7,770 points.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for physical investment.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 11:36, you're with To The Point on GB News. Now, we've been covering all day on how Labour and the Lib Dems are calling for an investigation into Suella Braverman, the Home Secretary, after she sought advice about arranging a private speed awareness course. We're going to get the thoughts of that top criminal lawyer, Nick Freeman, who has the nickname Mr... What's his nickname? What's your nickname, Nick? Mr. Loophole. Now, Nick Freeman... is the Home Secretary guilty as charged, or I wonder if you've ever arranged for some of your clients to have a private one-only speed awareness course?
So I assume the charge we're talking about here is not speeding, nothing to do with speaking to a mandarins. It's to do with arranging a one-on-one. There's nothing unlawful about that. I have arranged it for several clients. It's not something that happens very frequently, but as I say, on several occasions I've arranged it in the past, and on occasions actually been contacted by course providers and asked whether my client would be happy to attend a one-on-one. And the reason behind it is these courses are designed to make us safer and better drivers. They're an alternative to penalty points and a fine and an enhanced insurance premium. So they're of huge benefit to people. And what you don't want is the attendees to be distracted by the presence of someone who you know, has who's world-renowned, world-famous, because all they're going to be concentrating on is who is in the group as opposed to what the teacher is teaching us. That really diminishes the whole point of the course. So the answer is she hasn't done anything wrong at all in terms of approaching and asking for a one-to-one. If you don't ask, you don't get. Whether she should have contacted her colleagues and asked them to do that for her is a moot point. My own view is that they're public servants, they're paid by the taxpayer. This is a private matter and she should have dealt with it by herself. And, you know, what's interesting is, and I'm not touting for business, had she contacted a lawyer, not necessarily me,
confidentiality.
The lawyer should have known this can happen, and it would have been confidential and it would have been privileged, and no one will be talking about this subject in all probability.
But Nick, so let's just be clear. So you arranged for some clients to have a private one-to-one speed awareness course, and you were actually approached by these course providers on other occasions as to whether your client would want that.
On one occasion, I've been approached by the provider. On several occasions, I have approached the provider and requested, and my request has always been acceded to. And I have to say, if the Home Secretary had approached me and asked me, I would have advised her very strongly against it. You know, it's not my job to manage a PR, but really this is a lost opportunity, isn't it? You know, what we want is politicians who hold their hands up, who are human. Most people in the country who are drivers have done courses, and what she should have done, in my view, was when she was Attorney General, accepted that she'd committed an offence of speeding, said she was sorry, she was embarrassed, and she was going to do a course to make her a better and safer driver. and I think she would have won political plaudits for that. But she didn't do that, and it's now turned quite sour and nasty, and we've got the situation that whatever one's views morally in terms of whether she's entitled to have a course on a one-to-one or not, legally she is, that there will certainly be a ruling in terms of whether she should have used her staff, her colleagues, to have approached on a private matter.
But Nick, you'll know with the kind of individuals that you deal with, they aren't the people that would pick up the phone to you directly. There would always be a PA, a secretary of some sort that would deal with these matters with them. Could she just argue that's what she did? There was a to-do list and she handed it over and said, can you look into that for me and see if I can fit it in with my schedule one-on-one?
Yeah, that will be her reason or explanation. It will be mitigation. As I say, in my view, if you have a private matter of speeding, you don't use publicly funded employees to do that for you. What she should have done is used a lawyer or dealt with it herself.
I think I know the answer.
So
I know the answer to this question now. You know what I'm going to ask, but I know you probably won't give me any names of people who had these private courses.
Definitely not. You know what? Why? Because it's confidential and it's privileged. And even if I wanted to, I couldn't.
I'm sure you could, but are we talking like footballers, celebrities? Like, how recognisable would you have to be approached by the actual driving course and say, you've got David Beckham here, we can't have David Beckham.
We're talking about, I'm not going to mention any names, but what I would say is these are the people who are allowed to do one-to-ones are people that by their own very presence would cause such a huge distraction that the course really would become pointless because people would be just gossiping. So we're talking about world-renowned people.
You're talking about the
That's
king,
all
aren't
you're
you?
going to get.
Admit it, it's the king. It's the king.
No, the king, as you know...
Prince Charles, when he was Prince Charles.
He's excused from speeding.
Nick, you're a great man. Thank you for coming on.
Nick.
That's Nick Freeman.
Nick
Mr.
Freeman.
Loophole.
If that's not nominative determinism, I don't know what is. A lawyer called Freeman. Brilliant.
We love that. Now, they're back. That's really interesting, Amanda, wasn't it? That he was actually approached. Did he want to say
I think it's extraordinary. I would really like Nick's number, only for professional reasons.
Yeah.
And I'd like to ask him what happens, for instance, if one of your best friends borrows your car without you really knowing it, sort of says, I'm just borrowing it for a little trip while you're away, just round there to do some grocery shopping, ends up ploughing it into a field in the middle of Dorset, and then gives it back to you when you come home, and it's got mud everywhere.
No, intact.
That's him. That man did that.
There wasn't even a scratch on the car.
It was a brand new car.
There wasn't even a scratch on the car.
Pulled out by a
Taking a vehicle without the owner's permission is an offence. But he had your permission, so you had liability.
It just shows, you see, about how friendships survive all sorts. Friendships survive that too. Partly because I didn't tell her for 3 years.
But that changes
I
things
didn't
a bit.
tell her for
not really at all.
Does it not?
Now,
Freeman's saying
first of all, Nick's very good at his job, but I think the Home Secretary, Attorney General, as she was, getting Mr. Loophole on her side would not be a good look.
No.
And he said,
got another lawyer.
Yeah, but he said, she would not probably be in this mess if she had. He said, one, he thinks it's wrong to use the civil servants, and two, she should have just taken her punishment like everybody else.
We had a Uber PR man on this one, Piers Pottinger, who said she missed an opportunity here. She should have done the driving course.
If she just said, I'm like everybody else. But, Kevin, you broke this story. The Mirror broke this story.
Well,
and her office, who denied it?
They did. There was a special advisor denied it 6 weeks ago that she'd been done for speeding. Now, that was deliberately misleading. It came out the weekend because it was going around Westminster. Now, they were able to stand it up. I don't know if it was denied to them and they just overrode the
So that's
denials.
the advisor who misled your newspaper. I'm using the word misled advisedly.
Yeah, I'm using it advisedly,
Must be in big political trouble.
I'd have thought so. Well, she is. And it's bonkers and it's crazy. And it's often, you see it particularly at the fag end of governments.
Yeah.
We saw it a bit to the end of the Labour government in up to 2010. We certainly saw it at the end of John Major, where people are just making lots of silly, foolish mistakes.
Because they're thinking about themselves, right, at that point?
Yeah, she would never have qualified for a private course. That's why it was turned down, because she's not world-renowned. She's pretty well-known in British politics.
Well, particularly when she was Attorney General, which is when she was...
Much lower profile, but just like you've
It was crazy.
You've committed the crime. It's not a major crime. You've not killed anybody.
It's not a crime.
You've not robbed a granny.
It's not a crime.
Exactly. Well, what do most of us do? And I'm not look. It's an offence. It can be dangerous. But most of us, if you hear a friend, a family member has got points because they're speeding, you normally say, "Oh, hard luck, bad luck," and then they pay, get the points, or do the course.
But there's so many things now. You know, there's a friend of mine yesterday who took me across London. He'd been given a £100 fine because he was driving at 23 miles an hour in his minicab across London at 6 o'clock in the morning.
Amazing.
In a 20 zone. And Jane Moore, our other friend, she got whacked. Oh,
she did.
Sorry, Jane. Perfect driver. She was
just reverse out of that.
She won't like We're not live, are we? Can't we edit that out?
But the Archbishop of Canterbury, who I can't stick, 25 miles an hour in a 20 limit.
But
And he got a big
she would have
fine.
endeared herself to people because so many of us are getting nabbed now. And if you just put your hand up and say, I made a mistake, it would have been great.
Particularly in London, because his mate, the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, has turned London into a
Suella Braverman's deputy in the Home Office, Robert Jenrick, the immigration officer, recently got a 6-month ban for speeding. He took it on the chin. There it is. Done with.
I know so many people now who
He's got a government driver anyway. So
I know so many people now who've got to 9 points, because obviously you get to 12 points and then you've got a 6-month ban, by doing 23, 24.
Exactly, like my friend, like Billy.
It's infuriating. I was talking to a doctor over the weekend who comes back through a 20-mile-an-hour zone at 5 o'clock in the morning. She said, there's no one on the road. I wasn't doing anything dangerous, 26. She's up to 9 points now. As a mum who's going to need that car, and it's a surveillance state. Get used to it if you don't push back on it.
It's a stealth tax. They want the money.
How many points have you got on your licence, Kevin?
Well, in 40 years of driving, happy motoring, let me just polish my halo. I have never had a speeding fine. I'm not saying I haven't sped. I'd be lying on that.
If that horse and cart of yours, Kevin, it's just not very fast.
If you're on a clear road and it's sunny and there's no traffic, have I broken the limit on a motorway? Yes, I have. If I see a school 20 miles an hour, do I try and hit that 20 miles no faster?
Yes, I do. Been done, Amanda.
I've never lost my licence.
But how many times have you
I have, but I think there's sort of, we all understand we just go a little bit faster than we should, and sometimes you get points. But Kevin, I've got to tell you, I didn't date a guy who'd never had a point. That means you're a terrible driver.
Were you a girl racer? Maybe I'm just a smart driver.
My father was...
No, boring.
My father was a motoring editor, so...
It was.
So I'm a real petrol head.
And there were some pretty amazing cars your dad drove. I saw them, really.
We couldn't afford a car.
Actually, we had a second-hand car, which is our real one, so don't do the portrait for me. These were ones borrowed.
Get a little violin out.
Right.
Now, we're going to move on.
Let's go back to Kevin. What about this story? This is a Mail Online story, actually. An exclusive... Well, it's a Civitas. It was a report that basically showed that nearly a third of mothers, if they could, would choose not to go to work. And this was also talked about at the NatCon conference last week under really the driving force of Miriam Cates, who's trying to get us to change the conversation on this a little bit. And I'm not sure where it leaves us in terms of the equality of the sexes and feminism if you've got a third of mums who are saying, I don't want to go back.
Yeah, you know, the 29%, I'd like to know the proportion of men would answer this question if they were asked, or co-parent, or might be 2 males, 2 females in a family, whatever it is. I'd like to know. I'd like to know that figure. In some ways, I'm surprised it's only 29%, because if you could protect your money and you could stay at home, I as a dad 3 times would have had career breaks and stayed at home because I was the main breadwinner. I didn't know because I was the main breadwinner.
But you would have done?
I would, yeah. I'd have happily done it. I love bringing up the kids, but of course. There is more flexible working now. I think employers are better than they used to be. There are some legal protections, but I think we still haven't got over the fact that, look, particularly in a cost of living crisis when money is tight, people are made to make choices about going back to work often earlier than they would have liked because maternity, paternity pay isn't great.
It used to be seen as a noble occupation to be a full-time mum.
Like our mums were.
But it's quite boring.
Well,
this is the problem. This is the problem. You can get bored to tears being stuck at home with babies. If
You can as well,
You've
but
enjoyed
you-
a professional life and you want to go.
Look, my mum worked as well as my dad because we had 6 kids and money was tight. And no need to get the little violin out again. No. But I think it should be about choice.
Yeah.
But there's no real choice if you're not financially supported, if you stay at home. It is the case now that actually career breaks are what normally knacker women in terms of earnings and promotion.
They set women back. And,
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
sadly, I could not have children, although I tried everything to have them. And I would have thought that I would have just stayed at home if I'd been lucky to have the 5 children I planned to have. But I also know, Bev, that lots of women that I know just say, you know, they're tearing their hair out with boredom.
Yeah.
And it's getting that balance, isn't it?
It is. It's all about the balance.
And when they get back to work, they've gone backwards.
That is the worst
Other
thing.
people have taken.
Others have moved on.
And there's no doubt that the reason that I've had the career I've had is because I haven't had children.
Yeah.
I would trade it all tomorrow.
Yeah.
But there's no doubt that I've, you know, being there all this 75,000 years I've worked.
I'm looking very well on it.
Very well.
Let's talk Biden.
Yes.
That's a huge story, Kevin, because Biden is saying America is going to give fighter jets to Ukraine. That's hugely significant.
Massively significant.
Big boost for Zelensky.
Huge boost. Who's been on a very, he's sort of jet-setting diplomacy. Went around Europe, went to Hiroshima in Japan for the G7, and America's now given permission for the F-16s, which are very advanced warplanes, to be transferred to Ukraine from Holland, Norway, and a number of other countries. And this is what Zelensky's been really looking for. Biden says he's got a cast-iron guarantee, it's unbreakable, that they won't be used to go into Russian airspace and attack Russia.
But it's a game changer, isn't it?
Game changer.
What he's been begging for.
He has. Well, he came to Britain,
and to think
asked
that
for them,
it was,
didn't get them.
you know, emblematic that this was done in Hiroshima.
Yeah.
You know, because they can see, a lot of the countries in the world now can see that it's going to be as bad as one bomb being dropped, what the Russians are doing in Ukraine. I think it's great news.
And I think he's still man. I know Bev doesn't agree with me. I think he's man of the year. Politician of the year.
Fantastic.
What, Biden?
No, Zelensky. And, of course, Rishi Sunak called him the new Churchill.
Yeah,
well, shaking her head.
Nah, I don't trust him. I think there's
Why
so
not?
much more to... Well, why not? Because of who he was before Putin, because he was widely recognised as being what was one of the most corrupt regimes.
No, but he was elected in 2019 on an anti-corruption ticket. That's why you won.
But talk to Victoria Newland about that. But no, I think
but
there was
that's his big
so
drive.
much meddling behind the scenes. Yeah, but he wasn't popular with the Ukrainian people at that time.
No, but Churchill wasn't popular at times, but he was elected on an anti-corruption ticket. That's what got him in. That's why people voted for him. In fact, even during this war, he sacked his deputy infrastructure minister for corruption. He is rock solid anti-corruption. It's only Russian propaganda.
It is not as black and white as that in that particular region.
It is. He's anti-corruption. He is not corrupt.
You only have to ask the Russian people who were already living in the Donbass, and I'm not defending Putin, who is no doubt corrupt as equally as corrupt.
No.
More corrupt. I would say that.
No.
He's swimming in some very, very dark seas in Russia. I don't deny that for a second. But I do not subscribe to the idea that Zelensky is somehow a whiter-than-white hero at all.
I probably wouldn't have voted. If I lived in Ukraine, I probably wouldn't have voted for him because he was too right-wing pro-capitalist for me.
But you might.
And he would have privatised industries, which sadly in state hands are corrupt. I'd rather reformed them. But now I admire him, and I'm a kind of bit of a peacenik. But he's been invaded.
Bev doesn't even agree that he should be wearing military fatigues.
Oh, I love his khakis. I so love it. I mean, I just think he's one of the most admirable men that I've witnessed on the world stage. I'm not just saying he's really hot as well. A little short for me, but really, really hot. And I think the courage he's shown, the way that he's been able to galvanise his country.
Charismatic.
He is charismatic and he's tireless. I mean, I have no words.
And his wife has stayed in Kiev. They've both stayed in Kiev.
Well, that when the Americans at the beginning, because it did look as if the Russians would have taken Kyiv very quickly. The Ukrainian military has performed miracles, and he was offered evacuation. He said, "I don't need a ride, I need ammo."
I love
And he's never,
that is...
but he's never, but he's never been away from award ceremonies and photo shoots and magazine covers. It is not that simple.
But that's who. It's a very simple conflict. It's whose side are you on? Are you on the side of democracy and freedom, or on the side of authoritarianism? I mean, that's it.
Putin or America making a lot of money out of never-ending war. We're done. Amanda, Kevin, thank you so much.
What about German men sitting down at the wing?
I know.
Can't we go on for a bit?
No,
well, Mark Longhurst might have a view on that because he's on next on GB News.
That's right.
Maybe we'll come back on his show.
Well, you can ask him. He won't mind. We're going to be back tomorrow, though.
We will be, at 9:30.
At 9:30. See you then.
Have a great day.
Hello, it's Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office with your GB News forecast. A fine day for most of us, sunny spells for many, and feeling warm, particularly towards the southwest. Less warm, I think, towards the north and the east because we've got high pressure out to the west of the UK, and that's bringing this breeze in from the North Sea and the Irish Sea to some of these northern, western and eastern coasts. And it's bringing some areas of cloud into eastern and southeast Scotland, as well as the north of England. Eastern England as well, seeing some cloud and some light showers initially before they ease away later and the skies turn brighter. But the light showers across the Pennines and the southern uplands will continue into the afternoon. Those are the exceptions to the rule, though, because for most it's sunny spells and mid to high teens or low 20s, 23, 24 Celsius possible towards the southwest of England and South Wales. So fine, warm, sunny day for many, and then we keep the clear skies into the evening and overnight. Still some areas of patchy cloud affecting the southeast and increasingly the northwest. But away from the cloudier zones, actually temperatures will fall away into the single figures, even the low single figures in some sheltered northern spots. So a bit of a chill in the air first thing Tuesday, but plenty of bright sunshine from the word go, and temperatures will soon rise. We've got areas of cloud here and there, especially through Wales, southwest England early morning and then breaking up into the afternoon. But again, it's a day of sunny spells, and for most it's dry with temperatures a little bit lower compared with today, but still high teens, I think low 20s. Towards the northwest of Scotland, we will see some patchy rain and drizzle arrive by the afternoon, and that will push into the Northern Isles by the evening. Thicker cloud generally for western Scotland and Northern Ireland. However, for much of the UK, the outlook is for more warm sunny spells to come.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine.